In a world that feels more complex and frankly more volatile than ever, it's pretty easy to look at each crisis as its own separate, massive challenge. But what if I told you there was a hidden framework, a common toolkit that leaders in pretty much every field are using to turn all that chaos into clarity? Okay, let's dive into this.
And really, there's no better place to start than with this incredibly blunt assessment from the former head of MI6, Richard Moore. He's not just talking about spies and geopolitics here. He's describing the fundamental state of play across technology, finance, pretty much everything.
So in his world, the challenge is right here, right now. How on earth do you run human intelligence operations when artificial intelligence can track every movement, analyze every communication, and spot patterns that put your most valuable agents at incredible risk?
Now, this whole problem of trying to separate the signal from the noise, well, it's not just for spies. We are seeing the exact same dynamic play out in a totally different world, finance. The challenge here is trying to see through the wild, chaotic, day-to-day price swings in crypto to understand the much bigger story, which is the quiet, steady march of institutional adoption of these digital assets.
And then you've got technology, where we're hitting a very real, physical wall. The AI revolution promises to change literally everything, but as experts like Andrew Ng keep pointing out, it's hitting some serious bottlenecks. We simply don't have enough electricity, enough advanced chips, or enough raw computing power to keep up with this explosive demand. So think about it. You've got spies, investors, engineers, all facing these massive, seemingly unrelated problems. It just begs the question, right? How do you make the right call when every single choice is high stakes and the future is anything but certain?
Well, the answer lies in a field you've probably never heard of, but one that quietly shapes almost everything around us: operations research, or simply analytics. It's the formal discipline of adaptation. It's not about having a crystal ball that predicts the future. It's about creating a structured way to make the best possible decision with the messy information you actually have.
And that's it, right there. This is the hidden framework. It's the common thread that ties all those different challenges together, giving leaders a toolkit for making smart, defensible decisions, especially when the pressure's on.
So, let's make this real. How does this actually work in practice? In this first section, let's dig into how this framework helps leaders manage environments that are just fundamentally unpredictable.
Okay, let's go back to the world of intelligence. The core tension here is a classic trade-off. You absolutely have to protect your agents, which means extreme secrecy. But you also need to gather intelligence effectively, which demands efficiency. And in the age of AI, those two goals are in a head-on collision.
And this is where it gets really fascinating. Analytics provides the tools to manage that impossible conflict. Agencies use game theory to literally think like their adversaries, letting them anticipate and counter surveillance moves. They use resource optimization to decide where to put their limited assets, whether it's in Ukraine or Gaza, for maximum impact. And they run complex simulations to stress test their entire operation against new AI threats before they ever happen for real.
All right, let's jump over to financial markets, because the challenge is so similar. It's all about navigating a tough trade-off. Just like executives at Coinbase will tell you, you've got the insane, daily volatility of assets like Bitcoin and Solana, but underneath all that noise, there's a very clear trend of growing institutional adoption and the build-out of real financial plumbing.
So how do serious investors actually navigate this? Well, they use stochastic modeling, which is just a fancy way of saying they use math to understand and quantify randomness. They use portfolio optimization to build balanced investments that can weather the storms. And they use cycle analysis, looking at historical data not to predict tomorrow's price, but to understand the bigger, longer-term waves of adoption. It's all about replacing gut feelings with a solid framework.
Okay, so we've seen how analytics helps manage risks that are already out there. But it's also a powerful tool for proactively building the future. So let's take a look at how it's being used to construct the most critical infrastructure of tomorrow.
The biggest story in tech right now is what's called agentic AI, AI that can actually take action for you. But as we talked about, its growth is being held back by very real physical limits. This is not a software problem. It is a hardware and an energy problem.
And this chart just lays out the core issues perfectly. We need more raw computing power. That compute relies on more advanced semiconductors, and all of that requires a staggering amount of electricity from grids that are already struggling to keep up. These three things are all tied together, and you have to solve them all at once. I mean, this is a massive planning challenge. And for companies like Google Cloud, this is their entire world.
They use capacity planning to forecast exactly how many data centers they're going to need years down the road. They run intense cost-benefit analyses to decide if it's worth investing billions in new specialized chips, and they use risk modeling to build resilient supply chains so that one factory shutdown somewhere doesn't bring the whole AI revolution to a halt.
And you gotta remember, this infrastructure challenge isn't just a commercial one. It is deeply geopolitical. Leaders like President Macron are pushing hard for what they call European digital sovereignty. The whole goal is to build up their own domestic tech in AI and quantum computing, so they aren't totally dependent on technologies controlled by the US and China.
And guess what? Analytics provides the strategic playbook for this. They use game theory to model the competitive chess match between nations. Procurement optimization helps governments figure out how to build their own strategic supply chains for critical parts. And network analysis shows them the best ways to get their research institutions to collaborate and innovate faster.
You see this exact same kind of step-by-step, systematic approach being used to modernize defense. At the big Air, Space, and Cyber Conference, they talked about how next-gen air superiority isn't about some single magic technology. Nope, it's a carefully planned process of integrating existing jets with new autonomous drones, layering on AI-powered command systems, and then validating that entire system with digital simulations long before you ever build a single piece of hardware.
So, here's the crucial point. This framework isn't some secret tool just for spies or Wall Street bankers or generals. In this final section, we're going to see how it's really a universal discipline for adapting to our biggest shared challenges.
And let's be real, there is no greater shared challenge than climate change. So when someone like Prince William gets up at COP30 and talks about the need for unity and courageous action, what he's really calling for is a whole new level of coordinated, intelligent decision-making to tackle an unbelievably complex system.
And just look at the toolkit. Does it look familiar? It's the same fundamental approach. We use resource allocation models to figure out the smartest way to invest in renewable energy. We use something called multi-criteria decision analysis, which is a structured way to make choices when you have competing goals, like economic growth and ecological protection. And we use scenario planning to understand and get ready for potential climate tipping points before they happen.
And that, at the end of the day, is the real power of this hidden framework. It takes these huge, contested, overwhelming landscapes, whether it's in the market, in technology, or in our own environment, and it breaks them down into a series of structured choices and ultimately solvable problems.
It's the discipline of adaptation for a volatile world. Which leaves us with one final thought, and it's for you. Think about your own work, your own industry, maybe your own community. What's that one problem that seems totally intractable, that might just start to look solvable if you only had a better framework for making choices?